starting off with, what the heck is D&D? I'm confused, James. What is D&D? Well, D&D is Dungeons and Dragons, but it's not just Dungeons and Dragons, because it's a game. It's a tabletop game, an RPG, a role-playing game, where you basically make a character, and this character can be whatever you want, your deepest fantasies. So basically there are three main things to a D&D game. There's the player, which is probably you. There's the campaign, which is the general big story / quest that you're going on, which sort of shapes your adventure. And then there's the DM, the Dungeon Master. Now the Dungeon Master is who's got the absolute power. Dungeon Master always has last say. It's the Dungeon Master's game. So if he wants to like guide you in a direction, usually they won't, force you, but they'll nudge you. They'll nudge you in the direction, keep you on track with the the main quest, the campaign story. So it can all be quite contained. Hello, Fireshed, by the way. You can be pretty much anything in Dungeons & Dragons. There are so many classes, and even if it isn't like an explicit class that's set out in the rulebook, I'm sure there's something similar that you could just take the stats from, if you know what I mean. So different classes and stuff have different abilities, so I don't know. There's bound to be something similar. If you want to be an anthropomorphized, I butchered that word, broom, you can be a broom. You just need to do some tweaking. You need to decide which class and race is most similar to a broom. I don't know off the top of my head what that would be, but doable. You could be a wizard broom or a pineapple, anything. Obviously, being able to talk would be a plus in a role-playing game. Wind Fairy, guaranteed there is that. there's that or something like that in D&D. Right. So creak, what's creaking? Is my chair creaking? Oh, the archers. The archer is usually the ranger, which is who I'm hoping to be if I ever get another game. Am I playing it? Not at the moment. Just finished up. Well, I'd say just finished up. Finished up a month or two ago. But I wasn't actually playing. I was the dungeon master, so I was in charge of the campaign and how it went. And it was my first time. It was my first time. So technically, I still haven't played. But I really want to. I've kind of played, because the Dungeon Master also role-plays all the NPCs, the non-playable characters, so any shopkeepers you may meet along the way, any villains, the DM will give them voices, backstories, thoughts, how they react to things. That's all on the DM. So being the DM is a lot harder than being a player, I must say. Because as a player, you can just throw out any old shit. But as the Dungeon Master, you need to sift through all that and think, okay, how is this gonna work? How is this gonna work in terms of the game? Like, okay, so Pete's just said he wants to be a broom. How the Dungeon Master then would have to logistically work out how a broom would factor into his campaign. So Dungeon Master definitely has the hardest job. Why can't I play? Because no one else wants to be the Dungeon Master. Probably because, like I said, it's pretty full on, pretty tough. You need to be pretty switched on. So yeah, that's why I'm not playing. I'm trying to get trying to find a volunteer to be the next dungeon master, because I did enjoy it, but I wouldn't mind doing it again, but I do want to actually play. Right. So that's the basis of the game. That's what Dungeons and Dragons is. Now, in terms of mechanics, I think it was mentioned before. The main mechanic in how you do things is just rolling dice. Now, there are many dice, many sided dice for different things, depending on what you're doing. The main one is the D20, 20-sided dice, as pictured below. And basically, I've got packs of dice. I've got dice for days. I've got little bags filled with dice. I think it's dice ASMR. Oh, I've got dice, my friend. And I've even got my little dragon as the dice keeper. Look at him, so cute. Right. Is it a board game? Well, yes and no. Because unlike a board game, you don't have like a piece that goes around the board. Usually you can, but it's like not, I don't know, that would be a lot more effort, because then you'd need like the figurines and the maps and stuff. Because every campaign is different, you'd need the maps and the figurines for everything in your campaign if you were to make it an actual board game. And having it on the board is sort of restricted, because then you can't change it on the fly if something doesn't work. It makes it easier to like track positioning, like where you are in a cave fighting a goblin, say, but I think generally it's a board game of the mind, as it were, with maybe a few little drawings and maps to help you keep track of where you actually are. But yeah, is it a board game? Yes and no. Right, so yeah, rolling for things. So if you're just trying to do something general, like, oh, I walk over to that stump, I'm gonna walk over to that big old stump and give it a hug. You don't need to roll for that. That's just, yep, you can walk to the stump unless you're a broom. And if you're a broom, you probably have to roll for everything. It's like, well, you're gonna have to get a nat 20 if the broom wants to walk over, grow arms, and hug the stump. So usually the higher you roll, the better. And the highest is a 20. A nat 20. Which means a natural 20. Which means you've just rolled a 20. And then you add any modifiers onto that. I'll get onto modifiers, don't you worry. So if you get a nat 20, that usually means you fucking nail whatever you have done. So if Pete was a broom and wanted to hug a tree, rolled a nat 20, he would hug the shit out of that tree because he got a nat 20. So he has demonstrated the highest level of skill. So this makes it a bit different, because it's a role-playing game. You can choose whatever you want to do and how you want to do it, but the dice make it so you're not overpowered, so you can't just say, oh, that dragon? Yeah, I kill it. Game over. I kill the dragon. You'd have to the dice make it like an actual board game. Like that's the skill and the luck and the RNG. So you could say, I attack the dragon, then you have to roll to see if you hit the dragon, and then you need to roll again to find out how much damage you did to the dragon. And all of that is determined by the character's stats. So, got a... This is your standard character stat sheet. Now, when I first saw these, I was a bit confused. I was very confused, actually. Because there's a lot of numbers, a lot of different things, but it's more complicated than it looks more complicated than it actually is. So basically, the main stats are strength. So that's your, oh, am I doing something that requires me to be strong? If so, you'd need to roll and then add or minus your strength. Dexterity, again, they're pretty self-explanatory when you get into it. Dexterity, are you doing something fiddly, like picking a lock maybe? It would be dexterity. Constitution, how like steadfast are you? So if someone's trying to get into your mind, if some telepath's trying to take over your body, you'd need to roll a constitution throw to see if you can save yourself, basically. Intelligence, basically anything that puzzle solving, like, oh, do I see a way out of this room? And then you'd roll your intelligence. Wisdom is basically, do I know anything about, say, this particular goblin horde? And if you roll high on wisdom, you'd say, oh, the dungeon master might say, oh yeah, you read a book on this goblin horde, and it will give you some information. And then charisma is your, oh, I'm gonna flirt with this thing, and I'm gonna fuck this goblin. If you roll high enough charisma, you're gonna fuck the goblin. So those are your main ones in terms of rolls. Sorry, what? Thing? What are you on about? What thing? The other main things are obviously just your general. Yeah, I mean, if you've played any, I wasn't gonna fuck the broom. Don't worry, I'm not gonna fuck the broom. Right. If you've ever played like any sort of role-playing video game, your main stats might be health and your armor, what you've got equipped, what you've got in your inventory. All of that's on there as well. So your armor is, everything is broadly defined by a number. So armor is your armor class. That depends. That armor class is how easy is it for something to hit you. So say I, as the DM, was a goblin and I was rolling a dice to see if the goblin hit you, and your armor class was 16. If I roll a 15 as the goblin, the attack would miss or deflect off your armor, and you'd get no damage. Speed, that's how far you can move in a turn. And then your inventory, just your weapons, bits and bobs, just like throwing knives, provisions, salted pork, all sorts. So that's the basis of what you can find on your character sheet. And then if you've got a pre-made one like this, you might have some backstory on your on the back, which helps you, roleplay within the world. You know how your character feels about certain goblins and certain races and stuff like that. But the good thing I find about D&D is that the rules aren't too steadfast. They're like bendy rules, and ultimately it's up to the dungeon master of your game to decide whether you can or can't do something. So you can't just say roll to say I killed the dragon in one hit. The rules state that you need to attack him until his health goes down. So those are the sort of rules you need to follow in general. But in terms of other stuff, the rules are, like Quiz said, it's a guideline. So the way I like to put it is you can you're free to try anything, but that does not mean it's gonna work. Like, the Dungeon Master could let you try and kill the dragon by, say, jumping in its mouth and like slicing out of its belly or whatever. But then he could equally go, oh, you need to roll nat 20 for that, obviously, because that's never going to happen. And you roll, or he could give you like the lowest chance, and then you could just end up dead. So it's basically, think of it as if you were trying to do it. It's not realistic, but like, can you imagine it happening, kind of thing? Because you don't want to get too ridiculous, otherwise the whole campaign just falls apart. Chooses a winner? There aren't any winners. It's not like a traditional board game. It's usually a team-based game, like a group of adventurers. So it's, if you want to kind of look like it, it's like everyone versus the Dungeon Master, but the Dungeon Master doesn't want to win, because if you kill off all the players, end of game, this is done. So the Dungeon Master isn't going to be like outgunning for you, usually, unless it's a bad Dungeon Master. But they're not going to help you either. They're not going to like spoon feed you solutions to puzzles and stuff like that. So it's basically, think of it, Carius, as if you're playing a game, like a video game, like if you're playing Skyrim, but you're imagining it, you're playing it within the rules of D&D, you're playing it with dice and chance and all the rules I've said before. So like your ultimate quest might be to classic defeat a dragon. Defeat a dragon. What? I'm sure. Fine. Put it in terms of Minecraft. It's like Minecraft. You're trying to survive and beat the Ender Dragon, beat the Wither, blah blah blah. I don't know. Whatever game you want. It's like a video game, but a bit more freeing, and not actually a video game. You're gonna let the dragon swallow me and I'll slice the way. Rolls 5. Dies miserable death. Exactly. Exactly. It's not very forgiving. Like, the Dungeon Master could then decide, say, oh, okay, you managed to miraculously slide out if you roll above a 10 or something, make it a bit easier, just so he doesn't lose a player. Because if you're playing with a group of friends, these games can go over multiple days, depending on how big the campaign is, multiple weeks even, like definitely multiple sessions of this. So the Dungeon Master is not really gonna put you in a situation where you will die, like on the first session, because that's not very fun. Like, imagine if you were playing with a group of friends, like just playing any other board game, playing Monopoly, and then within the first roll, you're like, oh, sorry, Jeff, you can't play anymore. Go sit over there. Like, it's not gonna work that way. Can you kill the Dungeon Master? Technically, because the Dungeon Master is controlling all the NPCs, so every time you kill a goblin, you are technically killing the Dungeon Master and beating him, as it were. So yeah, that's kind of the basis of the rules. I believe there are obviously a lot of different ways to play it, a lot of versions of it. All depends on the campaign as well as to how you play it. There's obviously side quests, different puzzles. There's a lot to go through. It's a pretty in-depth game, but it doesn't have to be if you don't want it to be. So like me and my friends played through the Dungeons & Dragons starter set, which is sort of it eases you into it. Eases you into how the game's played. It's not too difficult, but it's still fun. It has a lot more of the campaign laid out, so the Dungeon Master doesn't have to sort of make it themselves. But then again, more experienced Dungeon Master could create a whole campaign from scratch, like from nothing. He could think up a world, think up all the villains and everything, and create like a whole story. And just if you're good enough at being a dungeon master, you can just get anyone to play that. It's pretty similar. Yes. Yeah, so those are some games that use the D&D rule set there. And thank you, Gail. Thank you. I did think I looked cute in the selfie I took. It was very good lighting today, so I I took advantage. Next thing I was going to talk about, unless anyone has any more questions about the rules, I'm sure I skipped loads. Another thing I was going to say, if you die, you don't typically die straight away. You get a chance to save yourself by making death saving rolls, which are pretty easy, to be fair. You basically just have to roll a d20 and then roll above a 10 for 3 turns. So it's pretty easy to stay alive unless you take massive damage. So like that's a rule that helps everyone sort of stay in the game, so no one's sort of left out, and no one has to like make a new character and stuff like that. But I think those are the main rules to sort of bear in mind when we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons. So this is a question that I had before I started playing and I started listening to Dungeons and Dragons podcasts. I was always wondering whether it was easy to get into, and the answer is yes, because like I said, I got the starter kit, which comes with, says it on the box, everything you need to start playing the world's greatest role-playing game. Bit of a brag there. Basically comes with a campaign, not too complicated, easy to follow, but still got like side quests, all of it. So you still get the full experience. Comes with character sheets, which were pre-done, so you don't have to worry about that. Don't have to worry about making a character, because there are other rules about how you make the character and stat the character out and stuff like that. It comes with the rulebook, obviously, which it's like a slimmed down version of the rulebook of just what you really need to know before you go into it. And it comes with the monster manual, which gives you, basically in the monster manual, you find pretty much every monster has a slimmed down version of a character sheet. So they have an armor class, they have a small inventory, like what weapon they have a health total, obviously, which is what you need to get down to 0 to kill them. And then obviously some of them have different skills which you need to account for. And maybe some of the bosses have some sort of like personality trait, like say you go up against like an evil elf and it's like, oh, this guy is a bad egg, and you should maybe roleplay him to be as evil as possible. You're gonna go, it's late. Yep, that's fine. Well, I'll upload these to I'm uploading these to YouTube after I am done with them, so feel free to catch up then, or watch the VOD on Twitch. So you can be an evil person. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with D&D, you can just be whoever you want to be. Obviously you need to like bear in mind who you're playing with. So generally people choose to be quite heroic, or like at least in the grey area between good and evil, because if you're just straight evil, maybe the other people don't want to like enable you, and you kind of need to stick together as a unit. But it's entirely possible to be evil, or at least do evil things. It's like, oh, you see a poor homeless child on the street, what do? You could easily say, oh, I chop his head off. Or, oh, I kick him in the mouth and steal his pennies. So, yeah, kick it. See? Called it. Good night, Gale. Thank you for watching. Yeah, easy to do that. And because you're just kicking a child, you wouldn't even need to roll high. You'd be like, the Dungeon Master might go, okay, for a headshot on this child with your boot, you'd need to roll a 10 or higher. So you roll a 10 or higher, kick the kid in the head, steal his pennies. But then this all depends on how the Dungeon Master wants to play it as well. There's a lot of things to consider here, because then the Dungeon Master could go, oh, a group of 3 ruffians saw you kick this kid in the head, and they didn't like it, so they're gonna come over and try and slice your neck. So then you have to fight those guys. So you never really know. You never really know. It all depends. Every game of D&D will be different. Guaranteed. Even if you get the same starter set as me, you play it with the same amount of people, guaranteed, all different. All depends on the people playing it. All depends on the Dungeon Master. All depends on what roles you do. It's possible to do a speed run if by a miracle all you roll is natural 20s and just ace everything. It all changes depending on a lot of different things. So yeah, easy to get into. Yes, very, very. The campaign books and monster manuals basically do all of the hard work. You just need to look up the right things, and then all the information will be there. Everything you need to know will be there. I've also got written down here that imagination is key. It is so important to have some sort of imagination. Otherwise it can get a bit boring real fast. Obviously, with the starter set, I didn't really get to flex my creative juices, as it were, as much as I'd like to, because it's a bit more like laid out. But I think as a player, mostly you need to be very imaginative, and maybe think outside the box a bit about how you want to solve a problem. Like, not everything needs to be solved by punching something in the face. That's one of the problems that I, as a dungeon master, had when I was playing. Like, there are lots of different ways to defeat monsters. Some of them are smarter when you roleplay them, and you can bargain with them. But for example, when I was playing with my friends, as soon as I was roleplaying I think it was a Cyclops under a bridge, and I was trying to get them to trade me some coins, so I'd let them over the bridge, and they were like, kill him. And they basically said, kill him to everything they encountered. So, which is fine if that's what they wanted to do and that's how they wanted to play it, but I personally think that would get quite boring, especially in a longer campaign. You want to explore different possibilities. What would you do, and what would happen if you did trade with the Cyclops, or convince the Cyclops to join your team, and then you have a Cyclops buddy. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff like that. So it's better to be creative, in my opinion. Yeah, cool companions. Yeah. At one point in the campaign, they did have a few companions. The companions as well would be controlled by the dungeon master, and that would be, again, you'd have another character sheet just for that character. But yeah, it's generally it's easy to get into. Basically, the experience I had, because it was everyone's first time playing D&D, the experience I had was, initially they just thought of it like a video game, like just go through, move through, kill everything. But then they slowly start to realize, like, oh, I can do whatever I want. Like, I can do whatever. So there were a lot of, oh shit, I can do that sort of moments, and I'll be sat there like, yeah, you can do anything. You just need to like explain how you do it and like get creative with it and see how well you roll, and then I'll pass over to me. I'll explain like how you do it and whatever. So it went a bit more gradually. It went from less I stab the fucker to, oh, I'm gonna cast a fireball at this guy. I will get onto that, Pete. That's one of my sections. That's one of my sections. I will definitely be getting onto it. Yeah, definitely a lot of, oh crap, I can do anything I want, huh? I know you're gonna get the webcam soon. Very good. Very good. Right, where was I? The only thing where it did get a bit complex in the starter kit was the spells. Spells, to me, are the most complicated thing of the whole game, really, because spells have more rules than, say, a sword, because there's not much you can do with a sword. You can stab someone, you can slash someone, you can hit them with it, basically. Same with a lot of other weapons, like with bow and arrow, you can shoot someone with bow and arrow. But with spells, when you start getting into the territory of, oh, I cast blah 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 and it will do this, it has a lot of different rule sets. Like there's spell slots which limit how many spells you can cast, which is basically like your mana, and a lot of different rules for individual spells, like, oh, this particular spell can't be cast on this type of minion, or this type of spell will instantly kill this type of minion. So we had two of us who were capable of using spells, and it didn't end up being used a hell of a lot, because basically every time we wanted to use a spell, we'd have to whip open the book, look through the spells, check the rules, look it up online, check what it does. It's like, oh, well, I have a magic missiles here. Let me just spend 10 minutes looking up what magic missiles does. And then you go through all that, and it's like, okay, you cast magic missiles, and it dealt 2 damage. Like, oh, that wasn't fucking worth it, was it? So, I mean, personally, I wouldn't go for a spellcaster. I'd go for, like, yeah. Oh, it missed. That happened once, actually. We spent a while looking up the rules of a fireball, and basically it's like, okay, I'm gonna fireball this guy, and he's gonna burn and die. And they rolled really badly, ended up missing, and I was like, oh shit, you missed. The bad guy was on a bridge at the time, so I was like, oh, you missed. Well, you hit the bridge. You hit the bridge, you burned down the bridge. So that's something the Dungeon Master can do. Like, if something happens in the game due to a roll, you decide what the consequences are. So I decided, oh, that'll hit the bridge, because the bridge had hit points, and the bridge's hit points were the like exact damage that the fireball would do. So I'm like, oh, this is too perfect. So then the bridge burnt down, the monster fell down, took fall damage, which is different. Again, see, we're getting a bit more complicated now. Took falling No, these are rules in the game. This was in the book. This was in the book. The bridge had hit points written in the book. But like it did not anywhere did it say why the bridge had hit points. So then I was like, "Oh, well, I guess he missed. I guess it hit the bridge. I guess it burnt down the bridge." So you create the world. You shape the world basically how you want to. I could have just as easily, oh, it curved upwards, hit the ceiling. So yeah, that's the only place. Yeah, you can easily make rules yourself. It might just get a bit complicated depending on what rule it is. So if you say, I don't know, I can't even think of an example, but if you make a rule and then it comes up again later and you have to go against your own rule, nah. It's I don't know. You can, but it's best to stick with the base rules just to make sure everything keeps flowing and like, you know what I mean. Need to make sure everything keeps flowing. So yeah, I've gone over my next section pretty much. That as the dungeon master, it was my job to control everything, basically. Keep the people in line and make sure no one breaks the game. Lots of role-playing the shopkeepers, the NPCs, the minions, the dragons, all sorts. It's a tough job. Lots of different roleplay. You need to try and maybe not think as yourself. A lot of the time, it's like, oh well, it's not what you would do in the situation. What would that goblin do if he was just hit with an arrow? And what would the dragon do if that little hobbit just like flipped him off? Like things like that. You need to think about what the creature or person would do. So as an example of how I changed a bit of the roleplay in my game, I made the shopkeeper in the main town racist to dwarves. Now there was one dwarf in the party, so whenever he would walk in, I'd double the prices for everyone because I was racist to the dwarf. Which obviously pissed off the dwarf, but everyone else found it fucking funny. And then it just ended up like, yeah, if the dwarf goes outside, I'll lower the prices. Yeah, just, I don't know, a silly example of how I role-played some of the NPCs in the world just to give them a bit more flavour, give them a bit more interesting. I say, yeah, it is race. Dwarf is a race, but I guess speciesist. He didn't like dwarves. Is what I'm saying. Right. What else was I on? Yeah, the other thing as a DM, you need to be sort of prepared. Your improvisation skills need to be a bit on point. You just sort of need to you need to know how to react to a crazy situation, because obviously, as I said, the players can say they're going to do anything. So you need to sort of, if someone says to you, oh, I jump off the cliff, or we all jump off this cliff, and you weren't expecting that, you need to know how to respond. You need to know, like, on the fly, you need to know, like, what's at the bottom of the cliff. Is it water? Is it jagged rocks? You need to sort of come up with the solution and the thing on the fly. So yeah, being the dungeon master is pretty hard, which is probably why I can't really find anyone else to take over from me. And also why I want to play instead of being the dungeon master, because it's a lot more fun. You can have fun as the dungeon master with all the role playing, but yeah. you do need a lot of creativity, especially if you're building the world up from scratch. But speaking of building the world up from scratch, it's a lot easier now than I wasn't alive, but when it first came out, I imagined it would have been quite hard. But when we were playing, we had the Dungeons and Dragons reference guide as an app on our phones. So anytime we needed to know what a spell did or a sword, like the stats of anything, we could just type it in, look it up, and get the official stat lines of everything. And that made everything a hell of a lot easier. So there's also, if you're making everything from scratch, there's a character creator app that I have as well, which basically lets you pick between the races or the species and classes like paladin, ranger, whatever, and it will give you all the combined abilities and what you can and can't do with that class and combination of things, and then it will let you roll or give you the stat lines based on the rules, basically. So you don't need to learn how to make a character sheet now, because you can just have an app do it for you, and then you can more easily track your hit points by just going onto the app and updating it and stuff. So I reckon that's definitely the easiest way to do it, rather than like going on the character sheet and having to like, you can see here, like everything's like crossed out and updated, where you can get new armor and stuff. So yeah, this is the character sheet for it. This is the base character sheet, which I went over earlier. Got all your base stats and inventory and stuff on it. Basically, like what you'd find if you went into your inventory in like an RPG video game or something. Sounds fun. We don't have any friends. Well, really, you don't need any. 100% you can go online and find a group of people to play with, which is basically what I'm going to talk about next, which is the best ways to play. So you can play online, you can play in real life, or you can have a mix, because on one session of my campaign, one of my friends who lives away literally just Skyped in. I had him up on a laptop at the table, and he played along with us through Skype. So it's just easily doable, because you don't have to physically do anything apart from maybe note something down, because you don't need to like physically move pieces or do anything like that. You can do it online or face to face. It's easy, or both. So D&D online is just you talking to people, really. As long as you've got good communication, it is very doable. If you are doing it purely like over like Skype or something, there are tools. So there's a website. There's a website where you can basically build a campaign from the ground up. So basically, you can draw in your maps and stuff, and then everyone can join there and see you like on a map as you walk through, which helps keep track of things when you're not in person. But personally, I think that would be quite restrictive, because once again, like I said, with the paper maps, if you've got a map, you can't as easily improvise something that would change. Like, you can't improvise that there's like a door in a wall if you need there to be a door in the wall, if you know what I mean. Oh yeah, I mean there's Dungeons and Dragons games, like, but it's not really the same. Like there's games and other things with the Dungeons and Dragons label, but I'm talking about the tabletop RPG, which is easily done just over Skype. You don't even need a camera; just voice is fine. Which is why Dungeons and Dragons podcasts are a thing, because everyone describes what they're doing in detail. You can listen to someone play D&D and then get a good picture yourself on what's going on, even though nothing physical is being moved or made. They, like the ones I listen to, they don't have maps or like little figures, anything. They're just, it's all in your head basically, and guaranteed I'm imagining it a hell of a lot different from what they're imagining it and what the other listeners are imagining it as, because it's all in your head. Yep, Critical Role, that's one of the big main D&D podcasts. I listen to Not Another D&D podcast, which I personally really like. It's by a few of the people who are in College Humor. I don't know if you know that website at all. It might be too young, but it's more of like a comedy one as well. They get into little scrapes, and it's quite amusing and stuff. But yeah, it's a good one I thought that was a good one to get into because I got into it right from the start. It's often, you can't just sort of like slot in the middle of a campaign and understand what's going on. You sort of need to find a point where they have new characters, so you can like grow with them and sort of, understand what's happening in the campaign, the storylines and backstories and stuff. So it is quite hard to find a place to slot in, but usually at the start of a campaign, that is a good place to start like listening to. And they haven't got too many episodes, it's quite recent, so it's a good one to sort of slot into. Rejected, what are you on about? Little fast in a relationship, will you be my friend? Of course, everyone on this channel is my friend. Everyone here, we're all friends here. Another one I listen to is D&D is for Nerds, and they do shorter campaigns and with different characters, so it's a lot easier to like slot in and like pick up things, because they always have new characters and they're always starting new campaigns and stuff. And I'm sure you can find like standalone campaigns where you can just sit there, listen to like 10 episodes, and then like the campaign's over because it's a shorter campaign. But yeah, that's how I first really got into D&D. I was listening to them and I was like, oh damn, I really want to play this game. But yeah, sometimes they play over like phone or Skype or whatever, and it's easily doable. There are a lot of different tools and apps now that really help people play when you're not there in person, because really the only benefit of being there in person is you can see like body language, you can see like face movements of the dungeon master, like if they're role playing and actually like physically acting, or if they're like, oh, the sword is this big. Like, obviously if you just voice, you can't just say this big. It helps a bit, and if you need to like draw a quick picture of something, that would be easier in real life. But all depends on the situation again. All depends on the situation. But yeah, even if you don't really have anyone who would, in your like immediate friend group, that you think would want to play, I'm sure if you searched maybe like on Reddit or somewhere like that, some sort of public forum, there's bound to be people looking for Dungeons and Dragons players. I've personally been asked by people to join campaigns online. I did say no because I just didn't have the time. Because it was like on a specific day. But there's definitely people out there looking for new players, and you can just slot into someone's campaign. The person that Tom, who has been on the stream before, playing Jackbox and stuff, he couldn't make it to a lot of them, but he did make it for one. So basically, we gave him a character sheet, leveled him up to the same level as everyone else, and then just slotted him into the story. We're like, they were like at a tavern or something, and you could just make it so they ran into him at the tavern, and then he joined the party, and then you would go from there. So it is entirely possible just to slot in halfway through. And the podcast that I mentioned, Not Another D&D Podcast, they often have like guest appearances for like three episodes, 3 sessions of say if they're in a certain city, they might gain a companion who is like a guest on the podcast for about 3 sessions, and then they go away. So it is definitely possible to drop in and out as well. You don't need to necessarily be there from the start. Obviously it helps with if you were there from the start, you know about the story and everything, but in game the other people's characters could explain that to you, so you could sit there and roleplay while the other characters explain to the new guy what has been occurring, and like you organically sort of catch up in that way. So yeah, definitely easy to should be. I haven't actively tried searching myself, but should be easy to find people to play with for sure. The only other thing really I was planning on saying is that it's just a really good way to hang out with people. It's just like when we played, we got together. We got together, played a bit of D&D, got to grips with it all, and what am I trying to say? Got a few drinks in, got a few snacks. It's just it's a good excuse to hang around with your friends. It's not like too intense. You can just sit back, relax, sit on your sofa, just have one piece of paper on your lap with your character sheet, and just have a nice little roleplay session. Do whatever you want, which is very nice, very nice. Is water dry? I don't know. No, I guess. I've just seen Pete in the Discord post the broom picture. Speaking of picture, that's another thing I was gonna show. So while we were playing, see, I have everyone's character sheets and everything from the campaign here. It was quite interesting seeing everyone's notes, like everyone's like different kill counts and everything, and their little notes and stuff, all the little trinkets they decided to keep from the goblins. Like some people like to collect trophies and stuff from the little goblins and stuff they kill. Like one player in my game started collecting penises of his fallen enemies. He'd like to chop off their penises and keep them in his little bag. So really, that sort of proves that you can do anything in this game. If you want to collect penises, that is entirely up to everyone. But anyways, yeah. Speaking of what did he do with them? They were just little trophies to signify the beasts he's killed. He had like a bugbear penis, all sorts. But yeah, speaking of drawings, I saw your drawing of the broom, Pete. One of my friends, when he was playing Jack, decided to draw all the characters. Obviously, this is how he imagined the characters, which was like completely different to everyone else. But it was just really interesting to see how he imagined everyone. So this is, he's not an artist, like, by the way. So like, don't expect anything too good. But like, this is how he imagined himself. This is how he. Oh, thank you for the biddies. I'll wait. I'll wait for Mr. DeVito. Yeah, this is how he imagined the main villain, who had like a weird little spider staff thing. This is I mentioned bugbears. This is how he imagined a bugbear. And obviously, sometimes like the D&D things and the monster manuals have like illustrations. That was nothing like the illustration. But hey, if he wanted to imagine the bugbear like that, by all means, you can. That's the thing with this game. You can just imagine however you want. This is, I think this was how he imagined Russell's character, the dwarf, because he had some boots of leaping at the end, which is hence the spring boots. So this is how he imagined the dwarf character. This is how he imagined the halfling thief, so like the Hobbit, who was also Asian. So this is... what was his name? Yeah, this is Pimpernel Chubbu. That was my friend Dave's character, and this was Ben's character. This is Miracle's character, or how Jack imagined Miracle's character. Miracle's character's name was Thrawn Dragonfucker Jr. So this is how Ben would look. The shirt there says "I fuck dragons," and basically he was named that because in his backstory, a big green dragon destroyed his hometown. So his personal quest was to fuck the dragon. And they did run into the dragon, actually, and the dragon was a lot tougher than they thought. That was quite a fun section of the campaign, actually, because they were a bit underleveled. Each of the sections had like a recommended level, and they were they were 1 and a bit levels under the recommended, and the dragon absolutely dicked them. But because I was playing the dragon, I was like, I didn't even mean to do it. I was like, oh, okay, the dragon's gonna use acid breath on you, because it was one of his listed moves, and it almost wiped out and killed the whole fucking squad before the campaign was over. So I almost fucked up then, because I almost killed all of the players. So that's another example of how you, as the dungeon master, should sort of keep in mind the consequences of like how you're actually playing it and stuff. Because I probably made it a bit too hard. But they got the dragon down to half health, which was it was quite impressive, especially seeing as they were underleveled. But alas, the dragon escaped and is free to this day. Who knows if Ben will ever fuck that dragon? Maybe he'll make an appearance in the next campaign. I hope so. But yeah, I think that's pretty pretty much the list of what I wanted to talk about, unless there's something or anything anyone else wishes to bring up or discuss. Any thoughts? Oh, excuse me. Excuse me. I am very sorry. Yeah, is there anything anyone wants to know? I mentioned a leveling system just now. There is a leveling system, so like each monster has its own like XP value. So if you kill a goblin, say, you split like 100 XP between the party, and then it's like 1,000 XP and you'll level up, and then leveling up gives you more spell slots, gives you more health, basically just makes you a bit stronger. That's how the leveling works. Will you do the podcasts in VR chat? Probably not. Probably not. Like, think of it this way. At the moment, about 3 people turn up, and that's on Twitch. That's on the basis that it's so easy to join. If I did it in VR chat, 1 person would turn up. You. It's just it's not worth it. It would make it a lot more awkward. The voices wouldn't be contained. I couldn't control what people say, which is always risky on Twitch, which is why in games I always have in-game voice turned off. It's just good in theory. In practice, I don't think it would be... yeah, but if I turned it off, what's the point of being in VR chat? It's just... I might as well do it here and it'll be exactly the same. I'm sorry, Pete. It's a no. It's a firm no. I am sorry. But is there anything else anyone wants to bring up or ask about Dungeons and Dragons before we end the pod? These have been well, the last one was about the same time. They've usually been about an hour, so pretty good timing actually. Thank you, Monkey. Thank you. I didn't realise you were still here. I hope you enjoyed. This is good background stuff. Please keep going. I mean, I'd happily keep going. But I've run out of stuff. I need a jumping off point. I need some questions or something. Yeah, you've got me as a background noise, and then you've got my background music going. I can feel my voice going as well. I've been talking too much. I did... Oh, I mean, hang on. I'm just going to check one thing. Because I did... Sorry. Oh, dearie me. Yeah, I mean, I asked everyone who was part of the campaign if they wanted to come on and speak about how they found it, but no takers on that, so no guest appearances today, unfortunately. Yeah, no guest appearances. Ben, I don't think Ben saw it. No, Ben didn't see the message. Sometimes he has awkward work hours, so he didn't see it, unfortunately. Maybe in future, every podcast, I'll put a feeler out there to see if anyone would like to join me on something. Anyway, I think that will wrap it up for Dungeons and Dragons. Overall rating for Dungeons and Dragons, a very good. If you've ever wanted to give it a go, just give it a go. Buy the starter set or find a group online. Give it a go. So yeah, that's where I'll cut it off for the YouTube